Hello friends, welcome back to my channel. My name is Shelby and today I'm going to be talking about all the books that I read in February. In February, I read 6 books. It was a pretty average reading month for me. I rated books from 3 stars to 5 stars. I read 3 ebooks and 3 physical books, so I'm pretty happy overall with what I read this month. At first, I was feeling a little disappointed that I only read 6 books in the month because I read so many in January, so I just had to do a little bit of rewiring in my brain and to remember that reading anything in a month is an accomplishment. So I don't know if you guys at any point ever feel like a little disappointed with your reading or how much you got to this month, and I feel that way too sometimes, so it's really just important to remember that reading anything is so amazing and so great for your mental health. So I hope that you are also able to reframe those feelings if you felt them in this month. Also, I know usually that I do a TBR wrap-up combo usually, but in the month of March I am hosting a readathon called the Forever Romance Readathon with Allie from Dreamer with a Book, and I already posted my announcement and TBR, so the books I'm reading throughout March are the books that are on that TBR, so be sure to check them out. But without further ado, let's get to the books I read in February. So the first book that I read in February was actually a reread. I am trying to count rereads as part of my Goodreads goal because I'm not going to discount an entire book I read just because I've read it before. So I am counting rereads this year, and I haven't read this book since 2020, so it was definitely time for a refresher, and that book is Crescent City, House of Earth and Blood by Sarah J. Maas. House of Sky and Breath, which is the second book in this series, came out in February, so I really wanted a refresher on the world and the plot lines and the characters before going into that new book. This reread was 100% better than the first time I read it. The first time I read this book, I gave it 4 stars. I am now giving it 5 stars. Having an idea of what was going to happen later in the book allowed me to pick up on a lot of details that Sarah J. Maas kind of sprinkled throughout the novel, and it was really kind of cool to see all these little Easter egg hints that she dropped before you get to the end. The world, the writing, the characters were just all so well thought out, and this reread honestly just further cemented Sarah J. Maas as one of my favorite authors. One thing I really noticed in this reread was how Sarah tackled grief and depression in this book. It's not a spoiler because they mention it in the description of the book, but one of the main characters loses her best friend in a really traumatic way. And I really picked up on how Sarah kind of had her going through these stages of grief and the thoughts that she needed to put up a front of who she was and the regrets she had with her friend. It was just so inspirational how Sarah had her on this journey of being in the lowest of lows and still finding a reason to live again. Once again, I gave this book 5 stars. I really enjoyed it, and I will talk about its sequel in a bit. I feel like it's a little bright in here. I'm just gonna hope it down a little bit. There we go. That's better. So the next book that I read in February was Electric Idol by Katie Robert. Katie Robert has written a lot of new adult retellings of stories. She has an entire smutty book series just about villains from Disney movies, and this is her new series, and it is about the Olympic gods, so she has kind of reimagined the Greek gods in a whole new way. Her first book focuses on Hades and Persephone, which is one of my favorite stories of all time, and I love when people do retellings of it. And this one was about Eros and Psyche. I also really enjoy Eros and Psyche recommendations, but I'm not gonna lie, I definitely enjoyed the Hades and Persephone book over this book. One thing that I didn't really enjoy about this book was that the plot moved fast, but there wasn't any action. So I felt very kind of scrambled. I kept waiting for something to happen, and I kept feeling like Katie Roberts was building this anticipation, and nothing happened until the very end. So that was kind of disappointing. I did really love the plus size representation in this book. I love how Psyche kind of, did struggle with her body image and kind of then decided to embrace who she is and become an inspiration for the people of Olympus. So I really love when authors put that representation in their books. I thought Eros and Psyche's chemistry was really good, but I don't know, something felt like it was missing. After I read this book, I looked at some reviews, and I definitely agree with the majority of people that the strength of this series lies in its world building. Katie Roberts has modernized the Greek gods, so they're not exactly like gods with powers, but more like figureheads who rule different areas of this modern Olympus. They don't have powers, they have influence, and I think that's a really interesting dynamic that she's created in this world. It's an interesting reflection on society, honestly, and I can't wait to see how it, evolves through the next installment. And I don't think I gave you a rating. I gave this 3 stars because, once again, I liked the chemistry, I liked the characters, but the plot just really wasn't there for me. So the next book that I read in February was the highly anticipated House of Sky and Breath. I have been waiting for this book for so long. This book, oh my god, where do I even start? First of all, it was 5 stars for me. It was just, I don't know how to explain this book without breaking down and giving everything away. So I'm just gonna say that this book was really great. The characters, the romance, the action, the pacing was all there for me. And it was just really well paced and plotted out. I annotated it by tabbing throughout the book. And if you want a more in-depth review than whatever I just gave you, I do have a vlog where I read this book, and it's non-spoilery when I read it, and then I have a spoiler-filled review at the end of the book. So if you guys want a little bit more in-depth into my thoughts in this book, because it is so recently come out and I don't want to give anything away, I'm gonna say that you should probably go see that video if you want to hear all of my crazy neurotic thoughts on it. So the next book that I read in February is Zodiac Academy 2, The Ruthless Fae, and this is by Caroline Peckham and Susan Valenti. I gave this book 3 stars. I started the Zodiac Academy this year, as you can obviously tell. This is an immensely popular book series on TikTok, and I finally caved down and tried the first book, and there's this kind of general consensus that the first book is not it. So I went into that first book thinking, well, I know this isn't going to be great, but apparently the rest of the series is fantastic. I did end up rating this the same that I did the last book, but I definitely noticed a lot more improvements in this book than that one. I just didn't feel like we had gotten up to that 4-star rating yet. In this second book, you kind of already know the world and the magic and some of the classes and the dynamics that are taking place in this world. So I definitely found it easier to get into because there was so much exposition and world building in the first book that kind of hindered my enjoyment. So it was nice to kind of just jump in. I'm starting to see a bit more of a personality difference between the twins that this book centers around. Their names are Darcy and Tori, and they have just recently found out that they are changelings. That means they are fae who were brought into the mortal world by some mysterious people in order to protect them, and that they found out they're actually these heirs to the Zodiac throne. They're princesses. And now they have to go to the Zodiac Academy, learn how to harness their powers, and avoid the 4 celestial heirs who are not happy that the princesses are back to stake their claim. I liked how we got to see more of Darcy and Tori's personalities. I like that we also got other perspectives in this book. We actually got to see the point of view from some other characters, which was kind of refreshing. I felt like in the last book, a lot of the heirs were evil just to be evil. It was very surface level, so getting to see their point of view gave them more depth, which I really liked. I also like how we got some more development in the romance department. You're starting to see the girls form these connections and get some a little bit deeper connections. I don't want to spoil one of them, but there's a specific relationship that I am really rooting for. Overall, I'm excited to get to the 3rd book. The 3rd book is supposed to have this event that they've been talking about since the 1st book, and I'm excited to finally see what all the fuss is about. So I'm hoping to continue this series next month, and I'm just enjoying myself. Next up, we have Year of the Reaper by Makia Lucier. This was a fairy loot book. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I can't remember if it was in the December or the January box. I'm gonna go with December probably. I think this was the last book of the month from last year. And first of all, it's stunning. I'm absolutely obsessed with the cover, and of course, Oh, Fairy Loot never disappoints with this art. Oh my god. So I gave this book 3.5 stars. I really enjoyed this standalone fantasy book. So in this book we follow Lord Cassia, who is believed to be dead by his kingdom, but he returns one day having survived a plague that has given him the ability to see ghosts and speak to the dead. Very soon after returning home, Lord Cassia is kind of tangled in this plot where someone wants to assassinate the queen and her child, so he teams up with a historian named Lena in order to uncover the truth. I really loved the twists and turns throughout this novel. There is a really big reveal towards the end of the book that absolutely shocked me, and it was just so well written and such a smart move on behalf of the author that I was really happy with it. It completely shocked me to my core, and I love getting those surprises in these kinds of fantasy books. I thought that the story flew really nicely, and it had some really great character and story development for a standalone fantasy book, because one of my main criticisms with standalone fantasy books is that authors don't really know how to balance world building with plot with development, but I feel like this was like the perfect size for this story. I do feel like we had a lot of unanswered questions by the end of this book. I thought that the origins of this plague that's sweeping the kingdom would be more important, or like why it had left Cass with the ability to see ghosts was important, but they didn't really seem to get into that in the book. The book mostly focused on the kingdom, like politics, and the plot to assassinate the queen, which was very interesting. I just wish they had gotten a little bit more into the magic of it all. But besides that, it was a fun and short fantasy read. Definitely a good palate cleanser, and if you're interested in something a bit different, I highly recommend. So the final book that I read in February was The Good Girl Complex by Elle Kennedy. Elle Kennedy is the author of the Off Campus series, which is one of my favorite sports romances ever. So I was extremely excited when she announced this new book, and I'm so happy I got a chance to read it. This book gave me strong Outer Banks vibes. It does take place in Charleston, South Carolina, on this like beach town where you have this very preppy college with all these rich kids going, and then you have the local townies who kind of resent those kids, and you have the townie guy falling for the rich girl. I think when couples have differences that span because of circumstance rather than like personality or beliefs, it makes for really good chemistry and story because they have completely different worldviews going into the relationship. I thought Mac and Cooper worked really well together despite how different they were, and kind of their communication style and how they both supported each other throughout the book was really sweet, and I really enjoyed watching their relationship and kind of watching them weather all of the different horrible things that happen around them throughout the course of this book. It was just such a fun story, and the sexy romance scenes were just an added bonus. So I gave this book 4 stars. And those were all the books that I read in February. Overall, I am pretty happy with what I read. I read a lot of great books, and I'm really excited for March and to read all the romances I have on my list for the Forever Romance Readathon. Once again, I will link that and my House of Sky and Breath vlog down below for you to check out. If you guys like this video, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment. Hit the notification bell to get updates on when I post. I post every single week, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!